whether red or blue. I could not care less about Texas, me and you. They created this give me country that don't value hard work. For a Texan to survive, all we need are some seeds and dirt. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. We believe in family and we value our community. Gladly lend a helping hand to a neighbor in need. And we don't believe that government should provide for all of society's needs. No, it's the pride of a Texan to give to others voluntarily. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country, for it's long gone. They like our tax dollars and they love our natural resources. They don't want to see us driving trucks, they'd rather see us riding horses. And now they want to ban our guns, you know, especially the ones that look scary. But may I remind you of the Gonzales Cannon and the Alamo heroes we buried. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country, for it's long gone. This last verse is straight from the Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 1 and 2. Look it up. Texas is an independent state, yet presently we suffer. We no longer possess the right to locally self-govern. And now it's time as a people in which all political power is inherent. And in such manner we find expedient, we reform or abolish our government. I said, Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Here I am. It's Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist Movement, and it is time for the our normal midweek decompress, right? Our coffee talk, where I take a break from whatever it is I'm working on and join you right here to take your questions, talk about things that are important to the both of us, I would think, and just participate primarily in my weekly therapy session. Is that what it is, right? Yeah, I mean, look, as you can imagine, it's been a bit busy. And so for those of you who are here week in, week out, I want to thank you so much for being here. And of course, to all of you noobs out there that are here tonight for the first time, I want to say how much I appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to join us for a later in the evening discussion over all things Texit and the TNM and, just what's going on. And, I'm pretty sure that if you didn't get the email and didn't see it on social media, you probably know what we're going to be talking about tonight. A little thing happened over the weekend. We'll talk about that. But look, before we get started, let me go ahead and get a little housekeeping out of the way. Number one, if you are watching on either of our YouTube channels, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. That way you will be notified every time we post a brand new video. And of course, on both my personal YouTube and the Texas Nationalist Movement's YouTube channel, chat is live tonight, right? So you're going to use chat to drop your questions, any comments that you have, and of course, just visit with one another, right? Get to know one another, man. There's always a really great group of folks hanging out. And just jump in there, drop your questions. And of course, Kara's running production tonight. So she'll be trying to get me as many of those questions as possible. And I will do my dead level best to answer the questions, or at a minimum, get them kind of compiled together and dovetailed into part of what I'm going to talk about. If you're watching on either of the Facebook pages, same thing applies. Like, share, comment. And of course, your comments go into the same chat that I see over here on the corner of on the side of the screen, right? So drop your questions in there as well. And of course, again, we are suddenly there's a question on my screen already. Premature question. Don't know why it's there. Should not be there. But I will answer it here momentarily. There we go. It went away. And of course, we're also broadcasting tonight on our Roku channel, right? So if you haven't checked out our Roku channel, go over there, do the channel search, look for Texas Nationalist Movement TV, and you should see my smiling face there live. So going to be a lot of fun. I'm already hearing from Kara that it is scrolling like a slot machine in the chat. So this is going to be fun tonight. I have a sneaking suspicion I know what everybody wants to talk about. So let's get down to it. How about that weather? Oh, just kidding. Not how that weather. Texas is on everyone's minds right now. The mainstream media is in a full-on meltdown, and the reason being is what happened over the last week at the Republican convention, right, over in Houston. But I want to just start off by saying this. This is a step in a very long plan and process, okay? And I'm going to give you a little context for it before we really dive off into some of the meat of it, because I think it, there are going to be a lot of you that have come to this. You guys are brand spanking new, right? Or you're just now finding out about this because the mainstream media is deciding to do some trash talking. However you got here, I think it's important that you have a little context. And while I wish I could do a super in-depth analysis and just kind of take you in Mr. Peabody's Wayback Machine to give you full context, time does not allow for that tonight. Maybe we'll do a special retrospective trip down memory lane at some point. But to help you understand what happened, why it happened, and why it's important, I think it's also important to understand where the TNM came from, right? Now, many of you have heard this story, but some of you haven't. That the TNM was founded in 2005 because there was no real political advocacy organization advocating for Texas independence, right? That was engaging the issue as the political issue that it was. And so prior to that, there was a 2-year study done where we looked at independence movements around the world, and we mined a lot of lessons out of it. And understanding that at the end of World War II, there were roughly 54 recognized fully sovereign, self-governing independent nations around the world. By the mid-1990s, there were 192. We had a lot of information to utilize. And so when we launched the TNM in 2005, we did so with a very firm, sort of fixed idea of how we needed to proceed, right? And I don't say that to say that it's rigid and there's just a plan A after a plan A after a plan A. It's just there is a very clear idea of the path that we have to take, and there are certain milestones. Okay, so a little context: when we founded the TNM, the Texas Independence Issue, the most recent polling at the time that we could get our hands on, showed that support for Texas independence was in single digits. Right. So you fast forward through the process a bit, and you understand that part of what we had to do as an organization was bring awareness of the issue, right? To let Texans know that we existed as an organization and served as a place where they could connect and organize, because that is a key part of success in political advocacy, right? As organization, developing organizational capacity, all those sorts of things. But more importantly, for us, for the first 4 years, we had to be sort of cheerleaders, right? We had to be the people that were convincing Texans that not only did it need to be done, but it could be done. Texas independence was a reality. It was not a hope, wish, or a dream. It was an inevitability, because from the moment that we kicked off the TNM, we were operating from a plan that inevitably ended in Texas becoming a self-governing independent nation through down one of 3 paths. Okay, so we look at where the support for this is, right? So we had 2009 numbers that showed just under a majority of Republicans, just under a majority of independent voters, and 15% of Democrats thought Texas would be better off as an independent nation. You fast forward to 2014, where we crossed over the polling threshold, half of Texas Republicans, right at half of independent voters, and over a third of Democrats believed that Texas should withdraw from the union and become a self-governing independent nation. And so in that process, right, so we know the numbers have only grown since, but in that process, we've done thousands of meetings and media interviews and things of that nature. But it always baffles me when people say, well, how come we've never heard about that? Well, this is why we have to do things to try to make sure that people are aware. We have to continue to show the world that support for Texas exists, right? So you go back to 2016, when we initially tried to get a plank on the Republican Party of Texas platform, calling for a vote on independence. And we spent, the leadership of the party at that time spent about a year trashing TNM, trashing Texas supporters, saying that we were fringe, saying that we didn't exist. We were a tiny group of people, all of that nonsense, right? So even with all those poll numbers, they still said things like that. And it was like, okay, well, we're going to come in here to the 2016 convention and we're going to shove it in your face that the people of Texas are ready for Texas independence. And in 2016, that's exactly what we did. Now, while the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas at the time stole the floor vote from us, and the establishment within the party did everything they could to try to scuttle any discussion, forcing a floor vote on the thing and then allowing the media and all the delegates to watch as these people that they had rubbed shoulders with all week, or in their communities and their Republican clubs or whatever it is, stand up and publicly support a vote on Texas independence, did wonders. And so while ultimately the floor vote was stolen from us, we got out of the convention what we wanted to do. And so we've been working this plan. And many of you know, when we finally had, at the beginning of the last legislative session, State Representative Kyle Biederman file House Bill 1359, the Texas Independence Referendum Act. It kicked everything up a notch, right? There was official legislation that would have given Texans a vote on the issue. Everybody wanted to talk about it until they realized that, holy crap, there's a ton of people in Texas that believe in this, and then they didn't want to talk about it anymore, right? The legislators, super resistant to this idea of giving Texans a vote. And that's even after, in 2020, we got a plank on the Republican platform, Plank 65, that expressly declared Article 1, Section 1. It invoked Article 1, Section 1, saying that the federal government had violated our right of local self-government and explicitly reserved the right to withdraw from the union. It was in there. It's Plank 65. It's been in there for 2 years, right? The media never made a peep about it. Not one. That didn't say a thing about it. And so, here we are. So Kyle files the bill, right? Legislative session comes around. Kyle files the bill, is a hero. He respects the Republican voters. He respected the plank. He respected Texas voters. He respected Article 1, Section 2 under the Texas Constitution, filed the bill. And we know the political establishment fought like hell against it, right? So then we kick off a petition campaign to try to force the issue where, again, we raised awareness. We connected with tens of thousands of Texans. We got more signatures on our petition than Greg Abbott did to run for governor, and he had paid staff and a $75 million war chest. But at the tail end of that, when that didn't happen, we ran candidates, and we got candidates across the finish line, right? Express pro-Texit vote candidates got across. Some of them are still running right now. They're going to be on your ballot in the general election, all the way, as we promised, from the state house to the schoolhouse. And that wouldn't have been possible without the petition. The petition would have been possible without the previous actions, on and on. So here we are. We come out of the primaries with, dozens of Republican county and senatorial district conventions submitting a resolution to put on the plank calling expressly for a vote on Texas independence. No more wishy-washiness of Plank 65, no more just reservation, an explicit call. Now, some of you out there, some of you that are not hip on partisan politics, or perhaps are of a different political persuasion, or maybe just you're disgusted and you feel disenfranchised by the party. There is a very clear reason why the Republican Party of Texas was ultimately where this battle took place, and it's quite simple. The Republican Party of Texas is, whether you like it or not, is the dominant political party in the state of Texas. They hold every statewide office and a majority in both the House and the Senate. And Republican office holders are the vast majority up and down the ballot, from the Panhandle down to Brownsville, from El Paso to Orange. That's just the way that it is, And so the thing is, when you talk about this convention, when you talk about Texas supporters, because they hold majorities all across, you're going to naturally see more action in the Republican Party of Texas. Now, I'll be the first person to tell you, and I've said this time and time again, the Republican Party of Texas hasn't led on the Texas issue, the Texit issue. The first political party in Texas to pass a plank to their platform expressly and explicitly calling for a vote on Texas independence was the Libertarian Party of Texas. Kudos to them, right? To step out there and recognize that we have rights under Article 1, Section 2. But that doesn't mean that Texas supporters have not existed in great numbers in the Republican Party. Again, one of the big rubs that we had with former RPT chair Tom Meckler, where he treated people that were Republicans and also Texas supporters like garbage. And so we went to bat for those folks, and I'm one of them. I've run for partisan office twice, and I ran both times as a Republican, right? So this is where the heat is. That's where you're going to see the most action. Okay, but there is another thing, because I want you to have this context. Understand this about the Republican Party of Texas State Convention. It is the single largest political convention in the world. Hands down. The single largest, not just among the states, but in the world, with over 9,000 delegates, alternates, guests. I think the final tally was like 11,000 or 12,000, somewhere around there. This time around, it is a massive group of very politically active and politically aware people. So, T&M folks that are Republicans carried this ball. They got the resolution through their senatorial district or county conventions and carried it all the way through to the convention. And at the beginning of the convention, most people think, oh, that thing kicks off on Thursday or Friday. No way. Our folks, our volunteers were there starting when the business started on Monday with a temporary platform committee. And they were in there advocating to add this plank to the platform, right? To add a plank to the platform, expressly calling for a vote on Texas independence. And we've got a much longer article that we're getting ready to post to the website where we thank so many of the volunteers. But I'm going to tell you, there were many T&M folks that showed up to all those committee hearings and endured all of that, because it's a lot. We're not the only issue that's there, but we were there for that issue. But we had some phenomenal people that were on the platform committee that understood their duties and obligations under Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution. And they went in there and they went to war for us. They went to war for you. They went in there and did battle. And here's the thing about it. Yeah, there was some discussion and a little bit of debate, but I think that Stephen and Susan and Chris would probably agree that the resistance that they saw or received, and frankly, any of our volunteers, the resistance was far lighter than any of us ever expected. In fact, when the exhibit hall opened up, and we had a nice big booth there, we were effectively the belle of the ball. Our volunteers connected with, conversed with, talked with well over 1,000 plus people while they were there. I mean, I would venture a guess to say that we probably wound up engaging 80% of the people that were there. Now, that's pretty easy when you roll in there and you're already close to 1,000 to the good of people that are already directly connected with the T&M, right? So we went in with a bit of an advantage. But the fact is that at every stage of the game where shenanigans had been pulled previously, where resistance had been met previously, there was no appetite to fight with the T&M, with the exception of a couple, right? Where we had Senator, and go watch Coffee Talk that I did last week for the Redux over State Senator Paul Betancourt, the TLR, and some of those guys trying to snipe at us. But honestly, we batted it down, because if you'll recall, I mentioned last week about this text message that went out to all the delegates from the shady pack called Coalition for Good Government, advocating for Adrienne Pena Garza for vice chair, and basically slamming Alma Jackson and Dr. Dana Myers for signing our Texas First Pledge. And it was interesting, because when the elections for vice chair started and the votes tally started coming in from the senatorial districts, interestingly enough, Garza was nowhere to be found she got what, 4, maybe 5 Senate districts out of the 31. And so at the end, it was a runoff between the two signers of the Texas First Pledge, Dr. Dana Myers and Alma Jackson, and Dr. Dana eventually winning it. So look at that. You have a vice chair. So when you hear people talk about that this issue is toxic, it's poison, only for the people who don't like it, right? And we've already established on multiple occasions that a majority of Republicans and probably a majority of independent voters and probably about a third or more of Democrats here in Texas are ready to see Texas, they at least want to vote on the issue. They want to be able to debate and discuss and things of that nature. So, the fact of the matter is that this issue is not toxic. It's not poison. And the media will say, well, being at a Republican convention, it's the hard ride, it's blah, blah, blah. But, that's not the experience that we've had. And we tell them that, but they just don't seem to listen. You see, over and over, the political establishment, the mainstream media continue to ignore what we tell them. And that is that the Texas nationalist movement across every measure is more representative of Texas as a whole than either major political party. Sure, going to the Republican convention is there's going to be a high number of people there that dig what we do, right? They love it. They're ready for it. But guess what? We find that out at a city park or going to the mall or knocking on random doors in neighborhoods, right? That's not unusual for us. And so and just to give you an illustration, we talked about this on the article on the website, but just to give you an idea of what happened, right? Our volunteers, our people worked it so hard that we wound up with this plank. Plank 33, state sovereignty. Pursuant to Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution, the federal government has impaired our right of local self-government. Now, I want to pause here for a moment because one of the things I think it's important to understand is that phrase, because we got it in 2020, we actually got that piece of it in 2016 and again in 2020. But what's interesting about that is if you read Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution, it literally says that the perpetuity of the Union depends on the right of local self-government unimpaired to all the states. So at the moment that the platform acknowledged that our right of local self-government had been impaired, it effectively declared the Union done. Okay, so it's important that that's in there and you understand that. But then it goes on to say, therefore, federally mandated legislation that infringes upon the 10th Amendment rights of Texas should be ignored, opposed, refused, and nullified. Texas retains the right to secede from the United States, and the Texas legislature should be called upon to pass a referendum consistent thereto. Now, that language at the end is quite interesting because it not only says that we retain the right, it also says that the legislature should call a referendum consistent with retaining that right. Well, my Lord, people, do you know what that is? That's a Texas referendum. So blank 33 calls for a vote on Texas independence. Up or down, that's what it calls for. But you see, our volunteers, so passionate, so exuberant, some of the most awesome people on the planet, were not satisfied because it just so happens that there was another plank added. Plank 224, Texas independence. We urge the Texas legislature to pass a bill in its next session requiring a referendum in the 2023 general election for the people of Texas to determine whether or not the state of Texas should reassert its status as an independent nation. Now let those words sink in, folks, because here is what's important about those words. Those words at the very end are exactly the question that we have wanted on a ballot for people to answer. It is the referendum proposition in the Texas Independence Referendum Act. Should the state of Texas reassert its status as an independent nation? Very carefully crafted wording after tons and tons of research on independence referenda around the world. And there it is. I would say in black and white, but I guess it's brown and white, right? But there it is. So there's the language that flew through temporary platform committee, permanent platform committee, and was presented to the delegates to vote on. And while we still don't have those vote tallies, I think anyone who has been involved in the Republican Party of Texas for any length of time whatsoever, especially during the platform process and the convention process, will agree with me that it is unheard of for a plank to make it all the way to that Scantron ballot or that vote and not pass. So while we may have to wait until next week to hear what the results are, I will say that I am not popping corks on champagne bottles yet, but I got it on ice. Because let's face it, even if it isn't a done deal, even if something weird happens, and we know, those of us who were there know what the sentiment of the convention is, right? We know where they are in their mindset. The resulting meltdown of the political establishment and the media has made it all worthwhile, right? So when news breaks about this, it is an absolute, just, I mean, a whirlwind. Okay, so first off, let me just say this. As I read these articles, I know many of you are furious, but as I read these articles, I have been rolling. I have been laughing. Every time I read one, I'm just, I just find it some of the most ridiculous things. But here's the deal. It's going to be one of those told you so moments. And we'll talk about it because I've got some excerpts. But if you'll notice, what they are saying is everything that I said they would say in this book. So, when you go to the Project Fear chapter and take a look, they are saying all the things that we have said they will say. And they are the weakest, most ridiculous arguments in the world. But here's the thing, and it's important for you to understand this. The fact that they are in full meltdown mode ought to tell you something. It ought to tell you that they're afraid, right? Because here's the deal. If there was not a snowball's chance in hell of this thing happening, of this thing potentially going to a vote of the people of Texas voting for this, they wouldn't be freaking out. They wouldn't commit ink to paper, pixels to screen, voice to microphone, putting their little, their airbrush Photoshop faces on cameras. They wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because it would be of zero interest. But the fact that at the largest political convention in the world, the dominant political party of a state that has the 9th largest economy in the world, has everything that it needs to be a self-governing independent nation, and more importantly, a majority of voters who are ready to see that happen, passes a resolution calling for a vote on independence. That's news. And that's why they're freaking out. In fact, Newsweek, from my understanding, didn't just do an article. They've done, I think the total is 3 or 4 at this point on this issue, right? Like this one. This one is always my favorite. Here we go. Could Texas really secede? Experts weigh in. these always crack me up, right? Because what do? They drag out the same old tired, ridiculous academics who don't understand, right? But let me just I'm just going to take a couple of these, right, just to show you what's what. Let's take this one. Okay, Francis Buckley, professor at Scalia Law School, George Mason University. You know, George Mason University is the source of a study that I quote an awful lot about federal regulatory accumulation. Interestingly enough, he says, I think that's very unlikely. Well, my Lord, wait a minute. I thought the consensus was that this was impossible. Wait, are you saying that, okay, well, it's just now it's unlikely. But I thought it was impossible, that it couldn't happen, that it wouldn't happen. But now it's just unlikely? But he goes on to say that he would, think it would be more likely come from the left or the GOP to take the presidency in 2024. Fun fact, I was actually on a Zoom conference at an event yesterday with the head of the Cal Exit movement. We were sitting on the same panel together. I was on there with him and Kyle Biederman and Elliot Axelman from the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence. It's coming from all corners, Francis. Not just the left, not just the right, just people that want to govern themselves. But here's the interesting one, right? He says, as someone, now here you go, voice of experience. As someone who lived through a secession crisis in Quebec, I hasten to add that I don't think this would result in a civil war. In my book, American Secession, I explain how a breakup would more likely happen through peaceful means. Holy smokes. What? An academic? Somebody with the PhD at the end of their name or whatever, an academic saying what we've been saying all along. Because he has experience, right? He has experience. We studied, we looked around the world. History taught us, but the political landscape taught us, and geopolitics and all those things. But here's an academic saying that it's not impossible. He thinks it's unlikely. That's our point of disagreement. But he says very explicitly that it's not going to be a civil war. Right there. And he talks about it in his book, American Secession. You ought to go pick it up. So, of course, they have Buckley, which is, I'm going to tell you, them having someone with a rational thought on it, just including one, is a rarity, right? So, goody gumdrops, right? Well, then you got to have this kind of nonsense, right? Let's go to Farber here. Dan Farber, professor at UC Berkeley School of Law. Oh, good old Berkeley, right? This is what he says. Secession is clearly unconstitutional. There's a reason the Pledge of Allegiance refers to one nation indivisible, because we all know the Pledge of Allegiance is in the Constitution, don't we? Right? Right? Okay. That's as much true now as it was in 1865 when the South, including Texas, lost the Civil War. There's that Civil War again, right? I mean, here it is. Unconstitutional, Pledge of Allegiance, Civil War. Called it. They say the same crap over and over and over. Well, look, Newsweek wasn't content with that, right? We got us a special case here. I'm going to give you this one because this one is kind of near and dear. And when I saw it, the name rung a bell, right? So you may not know that name, this professor of history at UT, but he says he's the chief historian at the Texas State Historical Association. Okay, this is a TSHA. Now, here he goes. It may be best to just ignore such craziness, but it is clearly simply grandstanding. As they say in Texas, it's all had and no cattle. Now, here he goes. Secession is illegal. It didn't work for Texas to be an independent nation in the 1830s and 1840s. Secession did not work in 1861, and it would not work now. Okay, so let me break this down. Oh, and of course, let's not forget what I have down in the box. Such talk is profoundly unpatriotic, and if such a vote were taken, it would not be supported by the majority of good Texans who value being a part of the American democracy and remember the many sacrifices that have preserved our nation. Okay, look, there's so much wrong with this. I mean, I don't even know how to pick it apart. But again, he uses the argument secession is illegal. Fine, show me the law. Show me in the Constitution. Crack it open. Let's see it, right? Let's see it. If it exists, go get you a copy of the Constitution and crack it open. Show me where it is. You say it's illegal. Show me the law. Because, and I know he probably has difficulty with this because he's a history professor. He probably has difficulty with law. And, you know, just like I don't take plumbing advice from an accountant, and I'm not going to take legal advice from a history professor, okay? Unless that history professor has got a background in studying this particular issue and the law surrounding it, okay? But he says, so show me the law. Crack open a book. Jesus, send me a link, right? Inbox me. Send me a link. Share it on Twitter. I don't care what you do, right? But just send it. If it exists, send it. But they won't and they can't because there is no law. It's just some crap that flies out of their mouths to take low information people, low information voters, or people that are scared easily and frighten them off and go, ooh, it's illegal, right? It's not. If it is, show me. Show me the law. But then, you know, it's interesting because he says it's illegal. And then he says it didn't work for Texas to be an independent nation in the 1830s and 40s. So I'm guessing he's saying that we should still be a part of Mexico, right? Well, it didn't work out so well in the 1830s. Well, last time I checked, we won our independence from Mexico, right? So chalk one up in the W category. And granted, 1861 didn't work out so well, so we'll chalk one up in the loss category. But let me tell you something. A 500 batting average will get you in the Hall of Fame. Let's try for 2 out of 3. Or simply, let's just put it to a vote of the people and let the people vote. See, this is what they're trying to do, is get you to argue the merits of staying or leaving and ignoring the fact that they are, by denying you a vote, depriving you of your inalienable right to vote on the issue. Right? What they're doing is they're misdirecting you over here with this hand. All the while they're stealing and taking away your right to even vote on it because they think it won't work out, because they think it's wrong, because they don't agree with it, because their lips are firmly pressed on the backside of Washington, D.C., right? Mordor on the Potomac, President Puddin' Pop. Because of that, they think that you don't have the right to decide. That's what they think. And it's utterly ridiculous. So which one is it? Is it that it didn't work out, or it's illegal, or, you know, but then it's like, oh, well, it's unpatriotic. Yeah. If you had a vote, it wouldn't be supported by the majority of, listen to this, by the majority of good Texans. Now, wait a minute. He didn't say that it wouldn't win. He said that it wouldn't be supported by a majority of good Texans. I'm guessing he is the litmus test, right? He is going to be the arbiter of who the good Texans are and who the bad ones are, right? And I guess for him, the bad ones are the ones who believe in things like, I don't know, freedom, independence, you know, things of that nature, right? But you see, here's the deal, and I don't want to dwell on this too long because his name rung a bell for me. I saw his name and I remembered this little tidbit right here. This article was taken from The Texan. Prominent Texas historian says Alamo represents what it meant to be white. So effectively, this professor is one of the ones going around promulgating the myth that the Battle of the Alamo, rather than being about independence, was about maintaining white supremacy. He's one of those reimaginers. So if he's going woke on the Alamo, why is it a shocker that he's now wanting to be the arbiter of good and bad Texans based on how they feel about this issue? What a surprise. But you see, that right there really kind of destroys his credibility. I mean, it really means that if you're going to soil the sacrifices at the Alamo, and it just kind of says you're a dirtbag, right? And the fact that you never read Travis's letter about how the Alamo defenders sacrificed their lives for independence tells me you're probably not much of a historian either. So, go figure, right? But here it is. I mean, it's, just one after the other with these. And, they go down there and they always drag out Sanford Levinson. He's a professor at UT School of Law. And, he says what he says. So if Red Texas tried to secede, that would be immediately be met by attempts of Blue Texas to secede from the slippery slope fallacy, man. You're a professor at the School of Law. You should probably go audit the logical fallacy course, right? But notice he doesn't say that it won't happen. He says, none of this, of course, is likely to happen. So let me tell you, somehow, some way, for those of you that are new, don't understand what a difference this is. If you go look at previous interviews on the subject, because they forevermore dragging Sanford Levinson out, propping him up in a chair somewhere and asking him this question. He has been in the "it'll never happen" category. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. He's been in that category forever. And here he is. Oh, it's not likely. What does that say? Well, just because he thinks it's not likely doesn't mean the rest of Texans don't feel like it's likely. Just because he doesn't want it doesn't mean the rest of Texas should not have the right to have the debate and have the vote. Now, one thing all of these media outlets have gotten completely wrong about this is neither one of these planks are an explicit call to withdraw from the Union. They're just simply not. Both planks very clearly, very succinctly, are calls to put the question to the people of Texas. And it's understandable because we fought for them to be that way. You see, in all that we do, when it comes to these issues of governance, when we talk about Texas, Article 1, Section 2 of the Texas Constitution absolutely must be respected. All political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit, right? But who does it reserve the right to make this decision to? It's there at the end. They have at all times the inalienable right to alter, reform, or abolish their government in such manner as they may think expedient. These questions belong to the people. And so every major media outlet, every political establishment hack has gotten it wrong, either on purpose or through sheer ignorance. Because neither one of these planks is an express call to withdraw from the Union. Instead, they expressly call on the legislature to pass the legislation to let you and let me and let everyone else in Texas have a say in this matter, as it should be. Let's go have the debate. But we know they don't want to have the debate because we win. How do you sell being part of the union? You don't. How do you sell not being part of the union? The way that we do it. When we ask every single person, anyone that we ask this question at this convention, we ask them, if Texas was already a self-governing independent nation, we had control over our own border policy and immigration policy, our own currency, our own military, all the things that over 200 self-governing independent nations around the world have. And instead of talking about Texas, we were instead talking about whether or not Texas should join the union. Knowing everything you know about the federal government today, would you vote to join the union? And when we ask that question, no one says yes. They all say no. And if they wouldn't vote to join, then there is no reason to believe that they would ever vote to stay. And that's just the facts. That's the way that it works. And that is why they run scared. Well, you know, as you can imagine, that was just one piece of the rhetoric, right? I mean, these guys have just been going on. And also, Newsweek drops another article. Texas seceding from U.S. would mean war, law expert says. I mean, really? Texas withdrawing from the U.S. would mean war?
And it's war! And it's war! Gather the forces! Harness the horses! It's war!
I mean, war. That's what they're saying. It's going to be war, right? And then even look at this. Look at these two chuckleheads.
Session. Unfortunately, the Constitution of the United States does not allow, I don't believe, the states to
No,
secede.
states cannot unilaterally
Right.
secede from the Union. We're going to have to do
Right.
a war.
If
You haven't heard before. I think they think we're going to war. I think they think we're going to war. We're going to war.
I mean, that's all they want to talk about is war. So when they've got no argument on Constitution or the legality or the merits of Texas independence or why they should be allowed to deprive us of our right to even vote on it, what do they do? Well, it's going to cause a war. No, it's not. And I want you to think about the irony of this situation, right? These are the same people who are putting the Ukrainian flag on their profiles on social media, right? They are, they're talking about how horrible it is that Putin invaded the Ukraine, but they're saying that if you vote incorrectly, the federal government will come in and do a Russia to us, and they're cool with that. So, like I told Harrison today on the interview that I did, I said, I fully expect that if that were to happen, that they would replace their profile flags, replace the Ukrainian flags with Texas flags and go spray paint fence posts or whatever it is they do to virtue signal these days, right? But it's hypocrisy, right? If hypocrisy was an Olympic sport, they'd have to flip a coin to see who got the gold. I mean, it's just the way that it works. But it's just, it's just not going to. So this is where they have to go to. And they are so uninformed that they keep cycling through the same tired old, multiple time debunked, ridiculous article that the Texas Tribune posted. Now, I have been asked by so many of you, thank you for the emails, the calls, everything else, why you haven't seen my name or anyone from the organization interviewed in any of those stories. Well, that's because they haven't reached out. So in anticipation of what was going to happen, our press director, Sharon, at the convention, went to the media room, visited with all of them and said, hey, this thing is about to go down. You're about to have 2 planks about Texas independence added to this platform. Here is my card. You better call when it goes down. You know how many calls I got? Zilch. You know how many emails came in? 2. I did one of the interviews today, do one tomorrow. But all these people, Newsweek, Politica, I mean, all these people, all these news outlets here in Texas doing these stories, not a single one, not a single one. And look, it's not hard. They get our press releases. They have the business cards. It's not like we're hidden, right? We have an 800 number. Look, if it's the money they're worried about, they don't even have to pay. It's an 800 number. There's the extension, right? All they have to do is go straight to the contact page. And it's literally right there. Connect with us. Drop us an email. But you see, they didn't want a rational voice at the table that could blow holes in every argument that those tired old corpses that they drug up, these third-rate adjunct professors from Bug Tussle Community College, or these guys out there from Scamford or Berkeley in California, which we don't care about, right? Instead of having those people, right? So somebody they could just absolutely and utterly destroy. Someone who has spent 25 plus years of their lives sleeping, eating, living, and breathing this issue. They want to save them from embarrassment. And let me tell you, when you got one side of the argument and you call yourself media, you're not media. You're a propaganda outlet. And that's what they're doing is there is a ready-made counterbalance. If they want the other side of the story, they can have it. It's literally a phone call or an email away, and they made a conscious choice to spew out what they spewed out and not have the opposing view. And look, that goes doubly. For you media outlets here in Texas that didn't do your homework, that didn't make the phone call, that just regurgitated some piece from Texas Tribune that we've debunked a dozen times, right? Shame on you for your incipient laziness, because that's what it is. Shame on you. And sure, this right here is probably going to rile some of these people up. And you know what? That's unfortunate, because it shouldn't make you angry. It should embarrass you and make you feel guilty enough to make a course correction. It's not too late. It's not too late. There's the phone number. There is the link. Do your job, not half your job. Do your whole job. If you're going to talk about the Texan issue, then you owe it to the people of Texas to have the organization that is making it happen as a part of the conversation. You don't get to leave us out of the conversation we started. Not acceptable. And so I'm going to encourage all of you, every one of you watching, whether it's live or on the replay, if you see a story about Texas or Texas independence and they conveniently leave us out of the conversation, I want you to tear up their phones, tear up their emails. I don't care if you get in your car and drive to their station or their offices and complain. But it's time they heard displeasure. Just like the politicians, when they deny us our rights under Article 1, Section 2, the media deserves the same kind of treatment. Because if they want to be the people that say that they're we're the impartial people, we just keep people notified. Well, you don't do it when you purposely leave out half of the daggum story. That just makes you propaganda for the status quo. And let me tell you, Texans are sick and tired of it. We're fed up. We're fed up. All we want is our rights respected under Article 1, Section 2. And let me tell you, I don't care how much it upsets you that the Republican Party of Texas may end up putting this in their platform. It is a time for us to rejoice, because I was there when we were polling at one single digit percentage. When the whole world told us that this would never happen, that no one else believed, I was there on that day. And all of us are here on this day, and we all made it happen. All of us. We are so much closer to a vote on Texas independence than we have ever been. And we're not going to let lazy media, recalcitrant politicians, or spineless jellyfish butt kissers stand in our way. We are going to win. And so we have taken it to this next step. And so many of you want to know what's next. And I know I'm probably going to run a few minutes over tonight, and I'm sorry for keeping you later, but this is my time to decompress. And we're here together, right? But here's what's next. You have to understand the timelines. The next legislative session, we have the general election at the beginning of November. 2 weeks later, pre-filing for bills starts. So when we get the final results and we know what the percentages are for the platform planks, then we begin the pressure. We begin the pressure on the incoming legislators, and we start that. These conversations already started. Our volunteers were all over every elected official they could get an audience with at the convention. So these conversations are already happening, right? So we're going to see movement, but here's what it's going to take. And I'm going to tell you this right now. If you have not registered your support, you need to go do it right now. TNM.me/vote. That's TNM.me/vote. And if you haven't joined, you need to go do that. TNM.me/join, become a member. But this is where we're at. We're getting ready to kick off something in September, and we're going to need all hands on deck. Okay. And I don't mean people that jam their hand in the air and then never show up. That's dereliction of duty, right? And I get it. I've talked about that before. But I mean Texans that are ready to make this happen. That they will do whatever's necessary. If it's host a meeting, they'll do it. If they'll go talk to people, they'll go do it. Right? But it's going to take. And we're going to need by August the 1st, we need 1,000 new volunteers. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. Because of what's coming in September, we need 1,000 new volunteers that are ready to rock and roll, that are ready to go to go help us in this next endeavor. And you do that by going to tnm.me/volunteer, right? This, friends, is how you win. You don't celebrate and then go to the house and say, well, we did a thing and it was really cool. You press the advantage. And the fact that the opposition is screaming so loudly means it is time to absolutely press the advantage. So if you were previously in the TNM, decided you want to take a break, get in the game. If you've never been in the TNM, you better get in the game. If you want Texas independence, never heard about TNM till tonight, get in the game. Right? What did it say? All political power is inherent in who? It's inherent in the people. This is not my job singly, nor is it going to be up to this group of volunteers that did the convention. They need help. Local leaders in their local groups need you there. They need your hands. They need your voice. And if you can't volunteer, I get it. But give something. Donate. Become a member. Make a donation. Go to tnm.me/donate. Help us reach Texans. That number that's under 500,000 right now on the website needs to be over 1 million before we go into legislative session. And we don't do that on hopes, wishes, and dreams. That's not how it works. Sometimes people say, why don't you have billboards in every city? Well, you know what? Those things are pretty daggum expensive. If you don't believe me, maybe you should have been there when I had the conversation about with Don Huffines at the convention. They're expensive. Or go ask Candy K. Horn about her $1.5 million billboard campaign, right? So things happen. So if you can't volunteer, if you can't be physically in the game, then help us by becoming a member or by making a contribution. Get plugged in. So it's coming, folks. This week is proof positive. And if you don't believe me, ask any single person who was at that convention, any of our people, ask them, what was the sentiment there? The people of Texas are ready to get and win a referendum on Texas independence. And we are going to make it happen. We're going to make it happen. So look, I want to take this opportunity, and I'm like I said, I'll have a comprehensive list, but I want to thank everyone, not just everyone everyone who got us to the convention through the petition campaign, the things before that, but especially those heroes that helped us fight it out at that convention. Susan and Stephen and Chris on the platform. I mean, I've got a whole list of names. I'm not going to read them out for you tonight. But to Nate Smith, the executive director, Daphne Armour, Paul Roby, our field director, all the volunteers who worked the booth and handled those thousands of people who came through, those who went out and worked the corridors, those who fought in the committee meetings, right, that held the ground and watched to make sure no shenanigans happened, and then all the delegates that believe that Texans have a right to vote on Texas independence. Yeah, it's us. So thank you. Thank you all very much. Oh, one more thing too. I know people are going to start saying things about Texas versus White, the Supreme Court case. Let me just play this little clip for you really quickly.
Which brings me to another important part of Texas history, the famous or infamous case, Supreme Court decision of Texas v. White in 1869. This case is almost universally used as an argument against the legality of secession. And in fact, this was brought up several years ago. I was at another conference in Florida, and somebody stood up at the Q&A and said, well, Dr. McClanahan, you say all these things, but, you know, the Supreme Court decided in 1869 that secession was illegal. And my response was, so what?
Amen!
I just played it because that's my sentiment on Texas versus White too. But that's a conversation for another time. All right. So you know what to do, right? You know what we got to do? We got to go win. So I'm going to encourage you. Go do those things. Let's get in the fight. Let's press our advantage and let's go win. For those of you, again, just joining us, that for the first time, you can get all your Texit questions answered. You can get a copy of this book right here on the TNM website, or you can go to texitnow.org, where we have the 100 most asked questions about Texit. You can get all your questions answered there. Plus, got a lot of interesting things happening with the website. In the next 2 days, I believe we are going to be making an announcement. So make sure you're getting your emails from us. We're getting ready to launch something, and I am so excited, so proud, and it's going to be a game changer. Keep your phones handy. That's all I'm going to say. All right. That being said, my friends, I am excited. I am beyond excited that we are so close to seeing a vote on Texas independence. So thank you all for being with me tonight. I did more talk than coffee tonight. What can I say, right? But I've got to get back to work. So I will leave you with the words that I leave you with every time we're together. They are the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now. And the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.